I do not know what their logic is on here.
Oh, I don't think there has to be any. All right, I'm going to go ahead and keep moving. If you have not yet joined, quite a few of you haven't, please enter that code to join. Yep, it's still there. All right, our objectives in part 3, a Kintako hut.
I don't think I've ever seen
In part 3, we're going to be looking at 2 different types of culture within a society, or within a society's culture, I should say. High culture and low or pop culture. As we get into this, I want you to be able to discuss intelligently what makes it difficult to distinguish low culture from high culture and vice versa. And I want you to be able to make your own judgments about high and low culture. Specifically, one part of that evaluation is which type of culture is better. And we'll start with high culture. High culture includes kind of things we think of as intellectual. They're the elements of culture that are assumed to require a strong intellect in order to understand, appreciate, and enjoy. And they're also prestigious, or if you really are being high culture, you would probably refer to it as prestigious. Part of its prestige is also that this is the type of culture that is associated with the wealthy and the politically powerful. Some examples of high culture would include opera. Opera often happens in very expensive, old places like that were often paid for by wealthy individuals. No, that's right. And to my knowledge, there's never been an opera held in St. Joe's Civic Arena. Not knocking Civic Arena, but I don't think we've ever had an opera there. So, yeah. But I mean, even the Missouri Theater, if you think about it, I mean, that's like represents some of that kind of more classical and expensive architecture and ornamentation. The other thing about opera is not just where it happens, but what opera is like. Opera often happens, even if it's put on in America, in other languages, like Italian. And a lot of the people who will go to this will be able to understand it. Because we think of Italian as one of those languages that has produced or has been tied to a lot of those kind of high cultural artistic productions. Whether it's opera or we're talking about Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci, linked to Italy. Also, think of classical music as high culture. We assume that it's what smart people listen to. And often in my experience, there are plenty of smart people who really, really enjoy classical music. But the other thing that tells us that it's linked to being intellectual is that expecting parents are often told, oh, play classical music for your baby. It's good for their brain. It'll make them smarter. And maybe even you start playing the music at the baby while it's still in the womb. And I've seen this, it happens. And a lot of classical music performances also happen in these kinds of settings. And for both types of performances, typically when you show up, how do you need to be dressed? Fancy, right? Whether that means a tuxedo, three-piece suit, right? An evening dress with expensive shoes, and I'm sure some other things that go with it. Those things cost money. And we could say the same thing for ballet. Same setting, same expectations of dress, and often it can be pretty expensive or difficult to get tickets to these events when they happen live. Art museums are also elements of high culture. How do we know something is good art? Well, I mean, it's been chosen by a museum and displayed by a museum. And then as the final thing, there is literature. Literature is books. Are all books literature? No. Things like Ulysses. Or, Kevin, did you ever get to finish Catcher in the Rye? Catcher in the Rye, also considered literature. Different types of writing, but they're all assumed to be kind of that intellectual and prestigious kind of writing. Then on the flip side, we've got low culture. Now, if low culture sounds derogatory, well, it's kind of meant to be in terms of how it was portrayed. And today, we would refer to low culture more as pop culture, pop being an abbreviation of popular culture. Popular culture is that stuff that is available to the masses. And it's not just that it's available to the masses, it's kind of pushed on the masses. Because some of you might think you've got like a boring relative that listens to classical music on public radio. And you're like, well, that was free. Well, it was. That's also why it happens on public radio, right? Radio that's funded by donations. Your radio stations that play rock or hip hop or top 40, those stations make money. Right? They sell advertising. They don't rely on donations. And that's because pop culture is spread commercially. It's created specifically for the point of making money. I know I said tickets to an opera or a ballet can be really expensive, but those things still don't exist for the sole purpose of making a lot of money. Low culture, on the other hand, does. Right? Somebody creates and performs a song in pop culture so that it gets played on a radio or gets played on a streaming service. Some examples of these pop culture elements that are created to make money. Television shows and movies. When I was your age, which is getting farther and farther in the past, TV shows happened on TV. They were broadcast over the air, through satellites, through cable, and they made money mostly by selling advertisements. And that has, right? And movies, they were things that might be played on TV later to sell advertisements, but in the first place, movies showed up in theaters, and then they went to DVD. Well, when I was a kid, they went to VHS eventually, and then later to DVD. All right, now, as Sean has pointed out, things are different. Right, a lot of TV shows and movies are created by streaming services, and that's the only place they're ever found. And they make their money not by selling advertisements, but by selling subscriptions. In any case, it's all about making money. Right? The same with mass market print, right? Like Twilight, right? Or The Hunger Games, or Divergent. Is there something that's kind of like Divergent? Is there something newer that's come along? It's kind of taking the place of those. We're getting a break for a while as a culture. So, I mean, what makes Twilight not literature like James Joyce? Because it's Twilight.
Because everyone knows it.
Yeah, well, okay, so everybody knows it. Right. One, like, what's easier to read, right? Something that is literature that you're assigned in an ELA class, or Twilight? Twilight, right? It's meant to be easy to read, right? And it's meant to sell lots and lots of copies. In other words, made to make money. And it's the same thing about magazines. And a lot of these that are made to sell are about the people who show up in TV and movies. Which one? That's, I don't even know if there's like an online version of Us Weekly. I know that like, if you go through a grocery store checkout, there's probably a copy staring you in the face right next to the candy bars that you can buy. Oh, when is it? Oh, I have no idea.
Does anyone over the age of 50 ever read those?
I don't know. I mean, I really have no idea. I just know that they're there. I just did a Google image search for Us Weekly, and that was the one I got. Yeah, I mean, it can't be that long ago.
What's that guy for?
I don't know. Sports are also an element of pop culture.
Which is why they added another football game season in the NFL.
There you go. Right. And, of course, commercial music. Music that is produced to make money. Like the stuff that would make the Hot Country Songs chart. Stuff that's not classical, but might be country, might be rock, might be hip-hop. Now, even before I got to this slide last hour, one student was kind of upset that there's not like in a really emotional or tantrumy kind of way, but just kind of a little bit agitated that there are supposed to be these kind of two polar opposites, high and low culture. It's set up that way, but it's not always that easy to decide. Now, before I even set a timer on this, the question is, which of these is high culture? And I'm going to kind of describe each of these and then leave it up to you to decide. We're going to start with Hamilton. Hamilton was a Broadway play. Broadway is that famous set of theaters in New York City. And if you make it to Broadway, you know you've got a big-time play. It later was recorded and streamed over Disney Plus. And on the other image, we've got the Sundance Film Festival, which, as you might have guessed, is an event where people watch lots of different movies. Now, often these are not the same kind of things as like a screening for the latest Marvel's Avenger movie or the next installment of Indiana Jones, which somebody has told me is going to happen, whether it should or not. But these are our two things, and I want you to decide which of those is high culture and which one is low culture. There are no right or wrong answers. I promise. No, I'm really not lying to you. All right. And by more than a 3-1 margin. You guys chose the Sundance Film Festival as high culture and the play on Broadway as low culture.
Which one's right?
There is no right or wrong. I really would promise. Now, what I want you to tell me is how you chose. How did you decide which of those was high culture and low culture? I just want you to describe to me your thought process. We'll take 3 minutes on that. I won't have any extensions. We're just going to take a solid block of 3 minutes.
Is it Hamlet, you said?
Hamilton.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry, because I somehow screwed it up in my brain to Damar Hamlin's last name. And then I was like, that's not right. And then I thought, oh, it's Hamilton. Hamlet.
Yeah, no worries.
Double confusion. Every time you click on the timer, it goes to the other side of the screen.
Interesting. All right. So, some of you guys focused on Hamilton and how it was used to make money. This arguing that it was low culture, but also, right, Hamilton, it happened on Broadway, for pity's sake, right, and it's expensive to go to, whereas film festivals are about movies. And for some of you, it's kind of a matter of how popular it gets. I mean, we kind of see this. This happens to like even bands. There are people that will be fans of a band as long as it's not very popular. And then as soon as it becomes popular, and people accuse it of selling out and going mainstream. It may never have done any such thing, but its popularity alone kind of changes our perceptions of it. Yeah. And both of these are fair answers, right? Sundance Film Festival, one, the fact that you've not heard of it might be a clue. That it is more about art films, and that's often how it's portrayed. And as an example, right, whenever I think about stuff that goes to Sundance, I think of The Lobster, which is a movie set in the future where people who are single are sent to a hotel, and at that hotel they have 45 days to find to fall in love, or they get turned into the animal of their choice. It has people who show up in other types of movies. I mean, Rachel Weisz was in, has been in all kinds of stuff, including one of the most recent Marvel Avengers franchise movies. What's that? What was it? Black Widow, I think, was the one that she was in. I mean, that guy's been in a movie he's been in lots of kind of more popular movies, right? And same with Colin Farrell. But yet they show up in this art film, doesn't make very much money, doesn't cost much money to make, and it shows up at Sundance. Okay. Let's see, the other thing I don't think I saw that sometimes gets highlighted as one of the distinctions. What's the genre of music that's used in Hamilton? Rap. Right? Is that type of music usually associated with high or low culture? Low culture, right? Now, this is not picking on Hamilton. Lots of things that have been on Broadway have not relied on classical music styles. But for some students, that's kind of what makes the distinction for them. Okay. And then, this is just simply an opinion poll. Which type of culture do you think is better, right? High culture, like Yo-Yo Ma playing the cello, or low culture, Mumford & Sons playing, I think a student that plays strings told me not to call it a bass fiddle, but just to call it a bass. Just a bass. Okay. Right. Similar instruments, in some ways. I know that's to a strings purist, that sounds like sacrilege, and I'm sorry. But which of these do you think is better, the high culture or the low culture?
Oh, is that on Air Day?
Yep. Okay, and we've got that same kind of 3-to-1 margin here, with most of you being in favor of low culture. Now, what does better mean? We'll kind of dig deeper into that later, but a lot of it's subjective. I had one student last hour who very much prefers to consume low culture, but also acknowledge that in their eyes, high culture is better, even if it's not what they enjoy and if it's not what they consume. All right, that brings us to the end of today's notes. You don't need to turn them in yet. Just make sure you've got them saved. From that point, you can reopen yesterday's assignment. There's kind of a bookmark to take you back to it. It's in the research design module. The bookmark assignment is called work time. You guys can continue that assignment. If you worked alone, you can continue to work alone. If you worked in a group yesterday or would like to work in one for the last bit of class, you're welcome to do that. But keep working on that assignment. If you have any questions about it, just ask. I will help you. All right, get to it.